Hello back, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. So we fixed the chat issue. So now you should be able to send your chat messages to everyone and to have a full discussion into the conversation. We're sorry for this. It's always the case with online platforms. You always have to find the hidden option that allows everyone to talk. So welcome in the second session for today. This session will end at 4:32 because we are 2 minutes late. So the session will consist of two presentations. The first one will be done by two people from Graphika, two extraordinary people. You already know one, Camille Francois. She's the Chief Innovation Officer at Graphika. I'm not going to represent herself. The second one is Léa Ronzaud. Welcome, Léa. Happy if you want to share your camera also, Camille. Léa, you work as a threat intelligence analyst in Graphika when you investigate disinformation and influence operations. You are specialized in analyzing online operations in Russian, Ukrainian, English, and French, and you are part of the team that exposed the now infamous operations known as secondary infection and spamouflage. Léa, we are very happy to have you with us today. We love to see new faces of people fighting disinformation, and we're very, very happy to have you. We're going to share with you the PowerPoint. We're going to give you the control. And Léa and Camille, you have exactly 18 minutes.
Thank you, Alexandre. I am also super excited to be joined by Léa today, who's in a really important part of our team and who's played a fundamental role in exposing secondary infection. One of the many qualities that she brought to this investigation is Léa speaks in an enormous amount of languages. And as you'll see, this is a particularly interesting operation because it did spread in a lot of different regions and content. So we wanted to give you a quick sort of roundup on secondary infection. We wrote a long report, which we put on a dedicated website, secondaryinfection.org. And we thought that today, since we have about 18 minutes, it might be good for us to talk a little bit more about what's not in the report. So maybe the context around it, what we learned during this investigation, and highlights for you a few specific tactics that are very defining of secondary infection. So let me take a step back and talk about how this all started, because it's a bit of an odd story. So it starts in May 2019, when Facebook uncovers 16 fake accounts on their platform, and they attribute those fake accounts back to Russia. And so at the time, I think Facebook has an understanding that this might be the tip of the iceberg, but it's kind of the understatement of the century, right? Like at this stage, it's like the hat on the tip of the iceberg, and it's really just the beginning of a very, very long rabbit hole. The month after that, DisinfoLab takes those 16 assets, looks at them and says, okay, that's actually not a Facebook story. That's a broader campaign. And then Nemo, who oversaw the DFR investigation, starts finding that these Russian personas were active on a whole bunch of different websites and blogging platforms. And so they published this first report on secondary infection, which is the report that gives the name secondary infection. And they detail the tactics that define secondary infection. And in December 2019, so a month after that, we see something very odd. I remember it was Thanksgiving Day in the US, and it was a few days ahead of the UK general election. And what we see is a series of inauthentic accounts on Reddit, on Twitter, but on a few other platforms too, that match the exact behavior and characteristics of secondary infection, and that are active disseminating the US-UK trade leaks document. Now, it's a little bit of an all hands on deck. We alert the platforms. We start having really interesting policy conversations. Perhaps that's for another time, but it's a reminder that it is very difficult to deal with hack and leaks conversation. And then on our end, we work with an investigative reporter, Jack at Reuters, who's absolutely fantastic, and with 3 institutions whom we trust deeply to make sure that they can keep us honest. So we reached out to Oxford Internet Institute. We reached out to DisinfoLab, and we reached out to Cardiff, and we put together this first report that says, hey, we're a few days ahead of the UK election, and we see these exact patterns of secondary infection in those accounts who are disseminating this material. And at that time, it's an interesting moment because in reality, we're not able to confirm that those accounts are secondary infection, because there is an alternate hypothesis that says it could be that because those behavioral signals are public, there was this first DFR report, it could be that someone is mimicking the behavior of secondary infection in order to look like it's secondary infection. And so we write that in a report. We say, here's everything we observed. Therefore, it could either be that secondary infection is back and is behind this operation, or it could be that someone is trying really hard to look like it's secondary infection. At this stage, all this happens very quickly. Reddit takes our report, does their own investigation, and comes out and says, actually, we are able to say that it is secondary infection because we have the original Reddit accounts from the first original secondary infection batch from May 2019. And we see those accounts, the US Trade Leaks accounts from December, and we're able to confirm that it's the same operator, and that therefore we're able to confirm that yes, indeed, secondary infection is back, and that operation is Russian in nature. That happened immediately on the spot. Month after that, we got a confirmation from the UK government. And so at this stage, we're updating the report, of course, but then we start sort of digging around and we realize that there are a lot more secondary infection that we hadn't found the first time. And we decide to go and sort of excavate all the remnants of all this operation and try to do sort of a more comprehensive pass on excavating this whole campaign. That is what we did for several months. That is what leads to this beautiful timeline that Léa is showing. We ended up exposing 6 years of activity, more than 2,500 posts on more than 300 sites and platforms. And so at this stage, it's not really an operation anymore. It's more like a tour of everything that this central operator has done across the years. Now, I say everything, but it's not everything, and we'll talk about this a little bit. Once we, let's just start first by talking a bit about what defines secondary infection and what makes it special. Léa, over to you. Tell us a bit about what makes secondary infection so special.
Okay, thank you, Camille. So I'm going to talk a bit about the tactics and the key characteristics of secondary infection and why this operation was remarkable. The first one is the use of forgery and wide forgeries. So they weren't using deepfakes or anything. They were using plain and simple forgeries of multiple media types. They loved letters. Official letters were by far the predominant form of forgery secondary infection was using. In total, we excavated 110 of those. They were mostly in English and in Ukrainian. So here it's how it looks like. This one was claiming that the US was selling arms to Ukraine, which was then selling them to Assad. Or this one was warning Ukraine over ethnical cleansing. After letters, they really liked doctored visual content, so images, website screenshots, and tweets. This is an example of a fake tweet that was supposed to be from Marco Rubio about the UK interference in the US midterms. What's very interesting about this forgery is that it was used as a main evidence from secondary infection assets to prove that the UK was indeed interfering in the US midterms. And that's a technique we've seen a lot in secondary infection, which is like them forging content and then using them as a proof of evidence to create more forgeries on top of it. Here is, for instance, a fake Facebook page of the European Union in Ukraine that was sharing content about Ukraine training ISIS, which was a very widespread narrative for secondary infection. Ukraine supporting Middle Eastern terrorist groups such as ISIS or such as Al-Qaeda. And this one was a forgery of a study from the European Union Institute for Security Studies. As you can see, most of the forgeries we've seen were targeting very sensitive and conspiratorial issues, as well as very angering issues, especially when they were targeting Europe, Ukraine, and North Caucasus. So, for instance, they were talking about ethnical cleansing, revolutionary plots, secret policies between states to undermine others. For instance, they were claiming the US and Turkey were plotting against Syria. And it was done in order to sow distrust in institutions and in governments while playing on a very, very nationalist stance. For instance, they targeted a lot the migrant crisis in Europe, and they were playing a lot as well on the European identity, and were disseminating and amplifying conspiracy theories, such as, for instance, the Great Replacement, claiming that people from Middle East and Africa are coming to replace white Christian populations in Europe. And the forged letters were very important to reinforce this sentiment of insecurity towards institutions, in the sense that they were always presented as leaked pieces in order to make people think that basically governments were plotting in their back. Interestingly, a second point about secondary infection is how it developed. It was active from 2014 until 2020, as Camille said, and it was very interesting to witness the switch of topics and targets over time. At first, it was targeting the Russian opposition only, and then it took over to several world events and other countries such as Ukraine and then Europe. So here, for instance, sorry, wrong slide. Oh, where's my slide? Never mind. This one. As you can see here, the language really evolved over time. At first, it was only content in Russian, English, and German, and then following local events, as I just said, they diversified their use of language. You had French, you have Georgian, you had Hazari as well, or Spanish. It was very broad. And this indicated a will to reach audiences as broad as possible, especially on very divisive issues. If you take, for instance, content that was targeting the European immigration wave, it was, let me remember, in English, Russian, French, Spanish, Italian, and Swedish, which is a lot. The difficulty here was to find articles in different languages, especially when the title wasn't translated verbatim. But in this case, for instance, picture and forgeries through reverse image search was very, very precious to snowball everything. And this is an example of cross-content dissemination. Camille, over to you.
I think what's interesting at this stage is that's a lot of content on a lot of platforms, but we really want to highlight that we don't think that this is the entire set of secondary infection. And for at least 3 reasons, right? Like, A, it's a lot of work, and I'm sure we missed stuff. And that's why we put everything out publicly on a website with a database and with a clear explanation of how we did what we did, so that others could come and complement the picture. B, and that one's really interesting, when we look at secondary infection over the years, we also see audiences pushing back. And so there are a few moments in secondary infection when they come, for instance, on Reddit, they post like one of the terrible forgeries that Léa is showing, and then people on Reddit are saying, what the hell is this? This is really bad. Who is this account? Where is this coming from? Also, this looks totally fake, and then start reporting the account. that means that there's strong reasons to believe that a lot of what secondary infection did over the years has actually been lost to content moderation efforts, and that we will never see it. Some of it is good, right? That means that audiences are resilient. Some of it also means that likely with spam classifiers, likely with users reporting, there's a lot of what they did that we will never see. And finally, the other reasons why we definitely don't have a complete picture is we only took high confidence assets for inclusion in that report. And so we took sort of a high bar for only including things that we absolutely were certain was part of the similar operation, which does mean that there are a few branches that we looked at that did look and feel like secondary infection, but in our book didn't meet the bar for inclusion, simply because, again, being intellectually honest, we actually couldn't say, yes, for sure, this is secondary infection. There is no other alternate explanation. So again, let's continue with Léa showing us what's unique in the set, acknowledging that there might be, definitely still are, missing pieces in our understanding of this operator. Léa, back to you for this cross-platform span of secondary infection.
Thank you. So one other very important part of secondary infection is how they used to disseminate content over the internet. There is really two distinct periods, one from the beginning at 2014 till mid-2016, and then from mid-2016 to 2020. Before mid-2016, it was very easy to track secondary infection because everything revolved around a couple of fake online personas. The most active one was the Blue Man, which was mostly posting in Russian. But basically, yeah, to find the content, you just had to translate headlines. And once you had all those personas, you could find everything. Then after mid-2016, it became more difficult to find them because they began using and relying solely on one-shot burner accounts. And it was way harder to find connections between burners than between the personas that had those whole networks of same articles in different languages shared. From the 5 main personas we got for secondary infection, only one remain active today. All the others stopped posting at the end of 2016. As you can see, this was very sloppy as well, which is one of the characteristics of secondary infection. If you speak French, you will very easily recognize that this piece of article is just gibberish, like pure gibberish. For the one who don't speak French, all the mistakes are highlighted in red. This was secondary infection in just one image, because when everything was in something else than in Russian, it tended to be very, very sloppy. For instance, sometimes they wanted to say IS for Islamic State, but instead they use IG, which is the IS, but in Russian, so Islamskoye Государство. Or they were just, they were claiming to be native speakers. So I'm gonna end my sloppiness part on this very interesting material, which is the team's special favorite. This is a video that they shared. Let's enjoy.
I love the Crazy Mayday video. I know we have to wrap quickly. First the Europe, and then the rest. But I think it's a good moment to also talk about the fact that while some of this is sloppy, including Garder le visage de l'Europe and first the Europe, then the rest, it isn't a reason for us to underestimate potential impacts. And the story of the US-UK trade leaks is a reminder of that. It is still important to go identify this infrastructure and to be able to disrupt it, because while you have a lot of sloppy operation, doesn't mean that once in a while you're not able to pull off something successful ahead of the major election in Europe. Wrapping on a few sort of open questions and known unknowns and learnings that we wanted to share. with this committee and doing so quickly. First, the first open question is, while we know that there are Russian actors, we actually still don't know exactly who is secondary infection. And when you think about it, there's something a bit disturbing about that, because they did pull off a few interesting campaigns, and they have been active for over 6 years. It's also the investigation that led us as a company to work with the most platform. To disrupt secondary infection, we had to work with Facebook, Twitter, Medium, Reddit, Quora, and even with the collective of all the researchers, our colleagues who helped us, with a little bit of help from the platform, and with a few governments looking into it, there is still no public, precise attribution of who is secondary infection. So that's the first thing, is like, let's admit that we still have this major blind spot. The second thing, of course, is here, this was a really good case for collaboration across the field, across researchers. And from a platform's perspective, it also taught us that sometimes smaller platforms that we tend to forget about are also extraordinarily affected by these campaigns and can be extraordinarily helpful in helping investigate. And finally, something else that I think we can easily forget about is, here, a lot of what we learned from secondary infection came from the victims of the operation, who, when we started publishing about it, came knocking on our door saying, hey, I received this bizarre fake forgery in my inbox again. That sounds like the stuff that you wrote about. Can you please investigate? I think that secondary infection makes the case that disinformation is a highly collaborative field, and one on which we still have a lot of blind spots, including important ones like who is secondary infection.
Thanks a million, Camille and Léa, for this fantastic presentation. I think Roman's presentation will echo some of the same conclusion that the one you made. We're going to take questions at the end of the session. We receive well your questions, so don't worry about this, and we're going to come back on this later. Second presentation on this session is from Roman Adamczyk. Roman has been working in the DisinfoLab since July 2019 as a researcher focused on disinformation in France, before taking the position of research coordinator. A few months later, he's now actively working on open source investigations at the EU DISINFO LAB team. Roman, you have the floor. And you should unmute yourself.
Yeah, I have the floor and the control of the presentation, which is great. So, hello everyone. First, I want to say that I'm going to do the presentation, but it was really a big team effort from the EU DISINFO LAB, and I really want to thank all the team which work on this one. And then, as you will see, we have decided at the beginning we thought to present our last investigation about InfoRus, the Russian press agency, which is tied to the GRU. But we have decided to instead to do another case to show that disinformation and information operation, it's not all about Russia, even if Russia is a big player. So today we are going to present you EP Today. So what is EP Today and what is this investigation we made? First, all started with a report from EU versus Disinfo, which echo a bit the point from Camille Francois about the need to share information. So we saw this report from EU versus DISINFO LAB, EU versus Disinfo, about a website, EP Today, for European Parliament Today, which was, according to this report, not linked to the European Parliament, but which was pretending to be linked to the European Parliament and to be really one of the official magazine of this institution. And the first thing the first thing we really noticed is really the definition about EP Today and in the Alberta section, which is EP Today is designed only for the MEPs to write articles about issues which they think are truly important and need intention of all their colleagues and other policymakers. So as you can see, this website, which pretended to be an official magazine to the European Parliament, was really even claiming to be somewhere when you can push ideas to target policymakers. So then we went a bit deeper and we had a look at the finding of EU versus Disinfo, because there were a lot of interesting things, but there wasn't a full attribution which was made, and we wanted really to try to understand who was behind this website. And one first interesting findings with EP Today, highlighted by EU versus Disinfo, is that EP Today was really using content syndication to produce content on the website. And as you can see, the two main sources of article on this website were Russia Today and Voice of America. And this is really interesting because it's really two opposite sources in terms of the foreign interference spectrum. So we were like, why a website targeting the European Parliament use mainly these two sources to produce content? Maybe it's not. Maybe the main aim here is not only to have MEPs within from these two media. And what we noticed is that on this website there was also op-eds. And this op-eds from MEPs, so real op-eds from MEPs, we're talking mainly about issues related to Pakistan and India. So we were really curious, why is this website publishing really op-ed targeting, covering only this topic? So we went further, and what we found first is that this unofficial magazine of the European Parliament had a big Facebook page, more than 146,000 followers, which was managed from India. So then you will start to see a bit of a pattern. Op-eds talking from MEPs talking only about India, a Facebook page managed from India. And we had a look also on how the content, how the website was spread on Twitter. And we saw also tweets, we saw also that this website was shared a lot in India. So you start to see things. And we wanted really to get deeper and to try to have a clear attribution. So we had a look at all the information around the website. And the first thing we found using web archives, it's that a number that you can see here, which was on the previous version of the website, was the same number to a consulting company called the Srivastava Group, and this consulting company is based in India, so not a big surprise there. And also the address on the current website of EP Today at the time was also the same as the Srivastava Group. So here we started to see that maybe we had a good lead with common information between the EP Today fake European Parliament magazine and this Srivastava Group. Then we went deeper and we had a look at IP address, and we found that the IP address of EP Today was before the same as the Srivastava group. So there you have, so from there we were able to say this is very likely that this fake media, this fake magazine from the European Parliament is managed by this Indian company, consulting company. But then what is really interesting is that the website was not the only thing connected to Srivastava group, and we were able to identify a lot of small organizations in Brussels, which were connected from different ways to EP Today and to the Srivastava group. For example, West is a feminist NGO, and a lot of the interns from West, we were able to show that at one point there were also interns at the same times for EP Today. What we found is that a small organization defending Pakistanis minorities, their EOPM, their website was also hosted on the same server as the Srivastava group. Or we found other connections, same with these institutions, which was connected with the servers, with the Srivastava group. So, as you can see, we had a full ecosystem with a media amplifying message, but a lot of organizations having activities in Brussels, and these activities were really linked to topic of interest for the Indian government and this kind of things. And why is it even more interesting? It's interesting that we were able to show how all this ecosystem managed to have offline activities. So, for example, in November 2019, one visit of 27 MPs in Kashmir, the first visit in Kashmir after the start of a lockdown there, we were able to show that this visit was sponsored by one of the organizations of the Srivastava, linked to the Srivastava group, and was also financed by another one. So you have all these fake NGO helping to put in place the visit. And here, where it's even more interesting, is that we identified another trip in Maldives, and this trip is in Maldives with members of the parliament. Was organized by NGOs linked to this ecosystem, but was also covered by EP Today as an official visit, whereas it was not an official visit. So with the media, you can give, with the fake media, you can give a coverage to a visit which was unofficial and presented as an official visit to defend some specific interest. And then we went even deeper using all the servers and all the investigating servers, investigating address and phones, and we found another media, Time of Geneva. And what was really interesting with this media, Time of Geneva, is that the media, like EP Today, seemed to publish mostly syndicated content from other media. But at one point, when there was demonstrations near the UN headquarters in Geneva, this media was there to cover the demonstrations and to interview MEPs, and really to offer a visibility to demonstration which wouldn't have maybe wouldn't have been maybe as much coverage without this fake media, which was there really focused on amplifying some specific messages. And then we continued going even deeper in the rabbit hole and exploring all the servers and IP address of all the organization connected to this network. We found a big list of fake media which were used mainly to amplify again the same type of content. And what was behind this media? What was behind this media is what was the main strategy behind this media is that the network tried really to reuse the known media and to change a bit the name, to take the name of old media who are not working anymore. They took the name of this media as a legitimacy driver to be able to spread content. And so at the end, it's 65 fake media outlets in 66 countries, which are really there to amplify content on a specific topic to defend a specific interest. So what was really interesting for us with all this investigation is that you have a mix. You have a mix here with disinformation technique and offline activities to really push specific interest. And unlike a lot of disinformation campaign or disinformation campaign, which target a very large audience, here you have really an operation which tried to influence specific actors, and which was really successful to do so because we were able to see policymakers being involved in a lot of these events linked to this network, with the organization funding the fake NGO funding the activities, funding the trips, and the media and the fake media being there to amplify the message, and use this political figure which were involved in this network at really the spokespersons to defend their interest and to spread their messages.
Thank you so much, Roman. Very interesting presentation. We received a lot of questions. I'm going to try to wrap them up to both you, Camille and Léa. First, about all the questions about like a list available of fake outlets, the links to the forgeries, the link to the documents. Everything will be published on the DisinfoLab website, and feel free to search also on Graphika secondary infection. There is a special website, and on EU DISINFO LAB website, you will be able to find all the investigations. So first, a question is about a bit about methodology, data, etc. So I have a question like which is also from Sabaria Mohamed Saleh. What was the methodology utilized to collect all the samples? How did you do the search? And I would also ask, like, how do you find cases of foreign interferences? Like, where do you find this? I think that's a topic, you know, like, do you randomly work on the internet and find a weird case? How does it work, guys? Maybe Camille to start, and then Léa.
Yeah, that's a great question. It really depends. I think that in the case of train leaks, for instance, we recognized the pattern. So we didn't go and look out for it, but because we had written about secondary infection, because we had published about secondary infection, something happened and unfolded. And it was a false leaks campaign again. So we immediately looked into it and we recognized the pattern. Now that doesn't always happen like this, and I think that there's a lot of great diversity in the way we encounter foreign interference cases. Sometimes they are identified by law enforcement. That's the latest one we worked on, actually the one before that. So law enforcement in the US found a website that they were able to tie to the IRA. They shared it with everybody. So sometimes it's actually a government tip. Sometimes we find things, again, simply on our own because they cross our desk. And sometimes people flag things that are suspicious to them. So a really interesting case that we really enjoyed working on also on the IRA came because two Clemson University professor had found a suspicious Instagram post and had a feeling that there was something there. And then we created this big investigation team around it, including with the CNN investigation unit, and it turns out that they were right. So that answer from me, but just acknowledging the great diversity of the ways in which we encounter these campaigns.
Roman, what about you?
Me, I think one important point to highlight, at least from the EU DISINFO LAB point of view, it's that it's really complicated to follow everything which happens online, and for us it's really important that we share a lot of data, because this is how we are going to find and to see to find more things and to identify more networks. And for example, if you take EP Today investigation, we wouldn't have started all this work of going down the rabbit hole without the first report from EU versus DISINFO. And then to understand the context, we were not able to really comprehend everything without the helps from some journalists in India, which helped us to really apprehend all of this. So collaboration and sharing data, for me, it's a really important thing to better understand what is happening.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up with a question for Léa from my colleague Gary. So if I'm not taking this question, my colleague will certainly be angry at me. Léa, you showed us a fake Facebook page of Ukraine in the European Union. However, this page seemed to have had a blue check mark. What was the case? And if yes, would you know how they managed to get this verification mark?
Sorry, maybe I expressed myself the wrong way. This was basically a forgery, so we assume they took a screenshot of the page and added the articles.
Excellent. I think, thank you, it's super clear now. I think one of the question is like, after secondary infection being published and most of the accounts has been on Facebook page and accounts have been used as burners, or after EP Today, what happens? Like, does this thing stays online? Does the stakeholders, do they come back with a new action? So what happens next?
Alexandre, do you want what I want to happen or what's actually happening?
I want the truth. I want what's happening.
Okay. So what we wanted to happen, let's start there. We shared everything we had, including a database, and we worked with others in the space. And I think that we wanted to get to the bottom of the precise attribution. And the reason why we wanted that is, without an understanding of who exactly this group is, what are their incentives, motivations, funding, and strategic objectives, we are going to just have to remain in the space we are now, which is, okay, we know everything they've done in the past, but we're not really sure exactly who they are. So let's keep an eye out for if they're coming back, right? And unfortunately, again, because we don't have this precise attribution, our ability to keep an eye out is also quite limited. So indeed, if they do come back and adopt the same techniques, we will likely spot them. But we are in a place where the deterrence isn't huge, right? Like, they had a few accounts and now they're no longer active. Might they come back? Sure, that's a possibility, right? They've been doing this for 6 years. There's no reason to think that in 2020 they'll say, it's boring, I'll just go and sell some croissant now, right? So yeah, that's where we are.
Roman, from your point of view?
For EP today, it's a bit a different case because most of the activities were through websites. So for now, when you're talking about websites, there are really no regulation. You can't shut down a website like you can shut down a Facebook account or Facebook page. But here, what the good thing is. It's that by exposing this network, the people behind it were not ready to defend it until the end. So very quickly after we exposed all this website, most of the websites were taken down by the actors behind them.
Thank you. What also strikes me with both these two investigations coming from two different actors, I think that's very interesting to see what could be one of the actors, even if there is no attribution, and this obscure Indian corporation behind the other one. I think what's very interesting is like the two things, like first the forgery cascade. Just like you have one fake being created, which is not a very good quality fake, it's like far away from deep fakes, and used to justify all the fakes, and then used to justify other fakes. And that's also a thing that Roman spotted in EP today. Is like you have this cascade of fake websites quoting themselves, giving credit to each other, and actually forming a kind of a network, but gives the appearance of a much more structured ecosystem than what it is. So do you think that there is first like a strategy of these like fake proxies behind fake proxies is it something just to make the message more credible or more complicated to investigate? And the other thing I would like to ask is like many of these websites or of these burner accounts have quite a low engagement rate. Let's say they don't have like a 1 million follower. I think it's in EP today, you had a lot of fake media websites which did not have a huge audience. Like Twitter accounts were very small. So, like, is there a strategy? That's something we're trying to think of, right? Like a strategy to stay under the radar, to have some kind of content being disseminated here and there and here and there, so at some point it can be revealed.
I can start and then Roman can complete on his side. So I'm very glad that you put this on the table, Alexandre, because in the case of secondary infection, what's really interesting is that, and I don't think we talked about this, but secondary infection maintained really good OPSEC throughout the duration of the years. And so they didn't do the rookie mistakes of, hey, I'm going to connect from St. Petersburg and pay you in rubles, right? Like they didn't do any of that. And as a result, that very high OPSEC preoccupation at times comes at the expense of virality and engagement. When you do a single shot burner account, yes, it's harder to say where you're coming from. Yes, you're observing higher OPSEC, but as a result, it's also much harder to go and like create a serious following for yourself around it. And so I think that there's a little bit of a tension between like creating an operation that doesn't leave its traces behind and creating viral engagement of the kind that we discussed this morning. I don't know if that's also what you're seeing on your end.
From the EP today perspective, it was quite a specific influence operation. So you don't have this. There was not really a big need to have an enormous virality, but what is important here with EP today is really the need for legitimacy. So you are going to have the fake media, the fake NGOs, and all this fake environment, which is going to be there to have the people involved to push the messages. So it's really and with a lot of organization, a lot of different fake media, you can really because people are not going to investigate all these layers of fake things. it's more easy to push and influence people.
Okay. Last question before we wrap up. I'm going to merge the two of them. So first, what proportion of true info are shared by this website compared to forgeries or fake news? I think that's a bit more for EP today, but maybe Camille, you can fill in with all the examples. From Jean-Marc Guérin, other question. Unless there are criminal procedures, legal actions on these types of activity, which is very complicated, the
Alexandre, I think you lost us for a bit, or at least I heard the first question. I don't know if we're back on. I did not hear the second one. I don't know if others got the second one. Léa, Roman, I don't know if you got the second question. I can get started with the first one while, Alex, we get you back online. The question I heard was, what is the proportion of true information that are shared by these types of websites compared to forgeries and fake news? That's a really, really interesting and complicated question. In the case of secondary infection, it is one of the operators who seem to really enjoy sharing things that are downright fake and downright forged. It's interesting to think about the fact that one of their most successful operation, the UK trade leaks, seems to be the one operation where they did not use forgeries, but instead used real material. And I will say, sort of to put this back in broader context, it is actually quite rare to find actors who are as dedicated as secondary infection to sharing forgeries and things that are downright fake. More often than not, the campaigns that we work on, they tend to share things that are true, perhaps sensationalized, but definitely true or opinionated in nature. So here, secondary infection stands out too for its love of things that are downright wrong and forged. Roman, over to you.
Yeah, I lost a bit everyone for some seconds, but I think I remember the questions. So first for EP today, the fake, if I can call it like that, was there to give the legitimacy to some messages. Then, so the fake, it was the fake media, the fake NGOs. But in terms of content, it was more a way to spread some specific message and to amplify some specific message, but it was more opinions and geopolitical position that really themes that we can call as disinformation, but really it was in the amplification where you had the manipulation. And then there was also the question about how you can sanction this kind of behaviors, if I can say. It's really complicated, especially for websites when the disinformation operation is more linked to website. You don't have really ways to enforce anything, especially when it's between different countries. But then still platforms have a role to help try to limit the amplification of this kind of content. And I think for now it's the only way we can act. It's on the amplification, but having other measures is still very, very complicated.
Thank you, everyone. A conference is not a conference without a few technical issues. We've just been cut out. We're back. I would like to thank Camille, Léa, and Roman with a virtual applause of their presentation, and also Mirko and Nandini for this first day as we're wrapping up. I'm keeping two things, like two key takeaways from today. First, the question of business model. I think that's going to be a very strong discussion tomorrow with Albert Moukheber starting the first presentation tomorrow. So we'll start at 2:15 like today. And I think the other one is a bit about the cooperation. I think Camille and Roman make this very clear that we need to have a better cooperation between different actors in civil society. And we'll also try to understand this tomorrow during the panel on how to open the black box of algorithm, understanding how content is distributed online. And I think very different skills will be needed in this. We were around between 200 and 250 people today. I would like to thank you so much for all your questions. We'll see you tomorrow. The room will be open a bit before 2, so you can join before, and we'll start the program at 2:15. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day or night. Even people in New Zealand, have a good sleep. Bye-bye. See you tomorrow.